October 29th, 1950. 70 years ago today, NASCAR was at the Occoneechee Speedway for the 19th and final race of the 1950 season. A championship was on the line, and it seemed like it would all come down to the wire. Originally, there were 3 drivers in contention for the championship. Those drivers being sophomore and owner driver Lee Petty, rookie Edward Glenn Fireball Roberts, and 23-year-old sophomore driver Bill Rexford. So before we get into the championship, we need to go over some facts. First off, let's look at the track. Occoneechee Speedway is a 1-mile dirt oval, which opened in May of 1947. It was named after the Occoneechee Indians that lived in the area in the late 17th and 18th century. The land was originally a farm. The landowner originally raced horses on the land after building a half-mile horse track. Bill France Sr. bought the track after noticing it from the sky while piloting his airplane. France then expanded the track from a half-mile to a mile in length. By the time 1950 came around, NASCAR ran just 2 races at Occoneechee. Bob Flock won the inaugural event in 1949, and Fireball Roberts won the second race in August of 1950. Now that we covered the track, let's look at the drivers in contention for the championship. Lee Petty is a sophomore driver this season, having run 6 races out of the 8 races in 1949. Lee was also the first driver to flip in the strictly stock series, now the NASCAR Cup Series. He borrowed his neighbor's 1948 Buick Roadmaster and took it to the Charlotte Speedway, no relation to the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Petty would then lose control of his car in turn 3 and rolled it. Petty would then get his first win in the 7th race of the season at the Heidelberg Speedway, driving his cell phone number 42 Plymouth. Petty finished 1949 second in the points to Red Byron. For 1950, Petty ran very consistent. Before the season finale, Petty recorded 8 top 5s and 12 top 10s and DNF'd only twice. Even with no wins that season at the time, it seemed like Petty could easily walk away with the championship at season's end. But that wasn't meant to be. During a 3-week off period in July of 1950, Petty competed in other racing events outside of NASCAR. Bill France Sr. caught wind of what Petty was doing and would penalize him badly. Petty had earned 809 points in the first 8 races of the season, and France would take them all away. Petty went from having 809 points and running 3rd in the standings to having 0 points and dropping to last in the standings. Petty's consistent runs in the later half of the season would move him back up to 3rd place in the standings, but it was not enough for Petty to claim the title. Now let's look at the drivers who have a legitimate shot at the championship. The first driver who has a shot at the championship is Edward Glenn Roberts, known to the NASCAR world simply as Fireball. Roberts is a rookie in the series this season. He ran only 9 of the 19 races that season, but his consistency and the fact that most drivers that season didn't run all the races kept him in the championship hunt. In his 9 starts that season, driving multiple car numbers such as the number 11 Hudson Hornet for Jim Davis in 1 race, and the 11 and 82 Oldsmobile 88 for Sam Rice, Roberts had 4 top 5s, 5 top 10s, 1 pole at North Wilkesboro, and 1 win at Occoneechee Speedway in August of that year. The other driver in contention for the championship is an underdog. 23-year-old and New York native Bill Rexford is running his first full season in NASCAR. He ran 3 races in 1949, driving the number 4 and number 59 Ford for Julian Buesink. In those 3 starts Rexford made in 1949, he recorded a 14th place finish in his series debut at Langhorne and 2 top 5 finishes, a 5th at Hamburg and a 3rd at Heidelberg, the same race Lee Petty got his first career win. For 1950, Rexford teamed up again with Buesink, this time running most of the 1950 season in the number 60 Oldsmobile 88. He also made starts driving the number 8, number 20, number 61, number 62, and number 80 for Buesink. Just like Roberts, Rexford ran very consistent. Heading into the season finale, Rexford has 5 top 5s, 11 top 10s, and 1 win. This win came in the inaugural race at Canfield Speedway. Curtis Turner dominated that event, leading 120 of 200 laps before blowing his engine, allowing Rexford to take the lead and lead the final 80 laps en route to his first career win. Curtis Turner was originally in contention for the championship. Turner, like Petty, is also a sophomore in the series. He had 1 win, 1 top 5, 4 top 10s, 1 pole, finished 6th in the 1949 standings, and ran only 6 of the 8 races. Turner easily looked like a championship favorite until he went through a major mid-season slump and started to drop in the standings, just as Bill Rexford was moving up in the standings. By the time NASCAR rolled into Occoneechee for the season finale, Turner was sitting 5th in points, well out of the championship hunt. Now we get into the race. Unfortunately, I cannot find any information on how many points separated the two contenders heading into the race. Also, I cannot find much information about what went on in this race, so please, bear with me on this one. Fonty Flock was on the pole in the number 7 Oldsmobile 88 with a speed of 85.898 miles per hour. Fireball Roberts started second alongside Flock in the number 11 Oldsmobile 88, and Bill Rexford, driving the number 62 Oldsmobile 88, started all the way back in 29th, last place. The green flag dropped and the drivers went to work. The race was 200 miles and scheduled for 200 laps. Fonty Flock held on to the lead at the start and led the first 71 laps. Roberts was able to continue running behind Flock and managed to take the lead from him on lap 72. But where was Bill Rexford during all this? While Flock and Roberts were dueling for the lead earlier in the race, Bill Rexford was trying to move his way up from his last place starting position of 29th. Rexford managed to move up 3 positions into 26th before disaster struck. On lap 24 of the race, Rexford drove his Oldsmobile a little too hard and ended up blowing his engine. Rexford's day was over as he would DNF in 26th. So with Rexford out, Roberts looked like he had the championship in the bag. If Roberts was going to win the championship, he would need to finish in the top 5. That is when Roberts started dueling Flock for the lead yet again. Flock took the lead back from Roberts on lap 78, but Roberts took the lead back 1 lap later. But once again, Flock took it back from Roberts 2 laps later on lap 81 and started to drive away. Roberts knew he had the championship in the bag, but he wanted more than that. Outside of racing, Fireball was a smart businessman. The purse for the race was worth $1,500, and the championship purse was around $1,000. So for Roberts, not only was there a championship up for grabs, but there was also $2,500 going with it. And just a little fun fact, $2,500 in 1950s money is equivalent to $27,000 in today's money. As Flock drove away, Roberts was giving his all to try and win the race. He was still in position for the championship, but he really wanted the prize money. That is when Roberts pushed his car way too far. On lap 126, while still chasing down Flock, Roberts would blow his engine and would DNF in 21st, 5 positions ahead of Bill Rexford. When Roberts DNF'd in 21st, his championship hopes were over. Since Roberts did not get a top 5, it was enough for Bill Rexford, at the age of 23, to win the 1950 Grand National Series champion. But before we continue covering the champion, let us continue the race first. Fonty Flock would continue to lead the race until lap 132, when a mount in his car broke, causing him to pull off the track and DNF. The man who led the most laps that day would DNF and finish in 20th. Lee Petty would take the lead on lap 133 and would lead the final 42 laps before the race was shortened from 200 laps to 175 laps due to darkness. Lee Petty would go on to win the shortened race and get his first win of the 1950 season. So with Lee Petty celebrating his win and the $1,500 in prize money, Bill Rexford was celebrating his first championship, along with the $1,000 in prize money, while Fireball Roberts would lead the track with a broken car and empty-handed. Rexford would win the championship over Roberts by 110.5 points. Lee Petty would finish 3rd in points, 369 points behind Rexford, and Curtis Turner would finish 5th in points, 583.5 points behind Rexford. So that was the 1950 Grand National Series Championship. But what happened to the championship contenders after this race? Fireball Roberts would go on to have a legendary career. He would go on to get 33 career wins, with his most important win coming in the 1962 Daytona 500. 1950, however, would be the only time in Roberts' career where he would come close to winning a championship. In 1964, at the World 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, Roberts was moving up in the field, but on lap 7, coming off of turn 2 and onto the backstretch, Ned Jarrett and Junior Johnson wrecked. Roberts saw the accident happening and tried to avoid it. As he tried to avoid, Roberts lost control of his car and swerved to the inside wall. Roberts impacted the wall with such force that it flipped his car over and ruptured his fuel tank, causing gasoline to spill out of the car. Roberts' car landed upside down and the gasoline ignited, and Roberts was trapped in the engulfed car. Ned Jarrett, who had climbed out of his car, ran over to see if he can help, and as he got out of his car, he heard Fireball screaming, "Oh my God, Ned, help me, I'm on fire." Ned pulled Roberts out of the car, and Roberts was rushed to a nearby hospital. 6 weeks later, while recovering in the hospital, Roberts contracted pneumonia, and sadly, on July 2nd, 1964, Fireball Roberts passed away at the age of 35. And in 2014, Roberts would later be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Curtis Turner would also go on to have a legendary career. He would go on to get 17 career wins total. One of Turner's most memorable accomplishments came in the NASCAR Convertible Series race at Asheville-Weaverville Speedway in 1956, when he won the race after the race got red flagged because out of the 24 cars in that race, Turner was the only one left on the track after 181 laps because everyone else had DNF'd. In 1961, Turner, Tim Flock, and Bruton Smith turned to the Teamsters Union to set up a union for NASCAR drivers, the Federation of Professional Athletes. This union would give the drivers higher purses and a share in broadcasting rights and retirement benefits. Bill France Sr. caught wind of this and put a stop to it before it could even happen, as France stated that any driver part of the FPA would not be allowed to race, and he would ban Turner and Flock from NASCAR for life. If you want to hear more about unions in NASCAR, check out Slapshoes' video on YouTube about the worst race in NASCAR history. I put a link in the bio if you want to take a look. 4 years later, in 1965, France was in a bind, but NASCAR had no superstars. Two-time champion Joe Weatherly was killed in an accident at Riverside in 1964, and a few months later, France's star driver Fireball Roberts passed away from burns and injuries after his accident in the 1964 World 600, and Richard Petty left NASCAR to go drag racing after NASCAR banned the Hemi engine. France would have a change of heart as he lifted Turner's ban after 4 years. Turner would go on to get only one win in his return, the inaugural race at Rockingham, driving the number 41 for the Wood brothers. Turner was also the first driver in NASCAR history to qualify at a speed greater than 180 miles an hour, as he won the pole for the 1967 Daytona 500, driving the number 13 for Smokey Yunick. Turner was also the first NASCAR driver to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. On October 4th, 1970, Turner was piloting his Aero Commander 500 along with golfer Clarence King near Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, when the plane suddenly crashed shortly after takeoff. Both Turner and King were killed in the crash. Turner had plans to compete in that week's National 500 at Charlotte in a one-off race. Curtis Turner was 46 years old. In the 2006 movie Talladega Nights, Reese Bobby's number 13 was inspired by Turner's 1967 Daytona 500 pole-winning car, and Turner would be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2016. Lee Petty would go on to win 54 races. He would win 3 NASCAR championships in 1954, 1958, and 1959. Petty's biggest accomplishment in his career would be winning the very first Daytona 500 in 1959 in a controversial finish between him and Johnny Beauchamp. Petty, along with son Richard, owned and operated the successful Petty Enterprises. In 1961, Petty was nearly killed after he tangled with Johnny Beauchamp in a qualifying race for the Daytona 500. Both cars crashed and flipped through the guardrail, landing in the track's parking lot. Petty would receive multiple fractures, internal injuries, and a punctured lung that kept him in the hospital for 4 months. Beauchamp was also severely injured, but would recover and eventually retire. Petty, on the other hand, would return to racing, but ran only 6 more races before making his final start at Watkins Glen in 1964. In 2000, Petty would have surgery for abdominal aortic aneurysm. Despite having the surgery, Lee's condition dropped, and on April 5, 2000, Lee Petty passed away after suffering an abdominal aortic dissection. He was just 85 years old, and 3 weeks shy of his 86th birthday. Lee's death came 3 days after his great-great-grandson Adam made his Winston Cup Series debut, the first 4th-generation driver to do so. 11 years after Lee's death, Lee Petty was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2011. Finally, we come to the final driver on this list, the reason why this video was made. Bill Rexford competed in NASCAR until 1953, making 16 more starts. He would win 1 pole at Canfield in 1951, 1 year after winning the very same race. In that same race, Rexford would crash into the guardrail and go over it. Rexford would sustain minor chest injuries, and this crash pretty much ended Rexford's NASCAR career, as he would only receive 4 more top 5s and only 1 more top 10 in his career. Rexford would go on to compete in Mark, the predecessor to the ARCA Menard Series. where he found little success. He competed for 3 seasons in Mark, and in those 3 seasons, he finished top 10 in the standings. Rexford would later retire from racing after 2 competitors who replaced him in his former rides were killed, which changed his whole perspective on racing. Rexford would marry and start a family and move to Arizona, where he started a successful trucking company for 25 years before retiring to California, where he would live out the rest of his life. On March 18, 1994, after several months of battling illness, Bill Rexford passed away at the age of 67. Because Rexford was battling his illness, he could not accept his induction into the New York State Racing Hall of Fame, and 1 year after his death in 1995, Rexford was inducted into the Friends of Auto Racing Hall of Fame. As of October 29, 2020, Bill Rexford remains as the youngest NASCAR Cup Series champion, and he won it at just the age of 23, and remains the only New Yorker to win the Cup Series championship. 70 years later, in 2020, fans still talk about these drivers, the one exception being Bill Rexford. And as a racing fan, and a fan of NASCAR history, it upsets me that no one talks about Bill Rexford. According to sources, because the 1950 season and championship was so controversial with penalties for both Petty and Turner, Rexford is ineligible for the NASCAR Hall of Fame, which in my opinion makes absolutely no sense at all. Yes, he was not as successful as the other drivers, and yes, he only has 1 career win, but he is still a NASCAR champion, and he should be recognized as such. Other than Matt Kenseth, and not counting the active NASCAR champions still racing, Bill Rexford is the only NASCAR champion to not be nominated for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. A few months ago, during the summer, I was on my Instagram when I received a message from a random person who messaged me to tell me he really enjoyed my biography video I made about Bill Rexford earlier in the year, and he thanked me for making it. As I read further into the message, I realized this man was just not he wasn't a random man. This man actually turned out to be the grandson of Bill Rexford. I was blown away when I read that message, and I felt my heart just drop when I got goosebumps. I got goosebumps just by reading that message. That really made my day when I got it. Him and I talked after that, and he said he was trying to get Bill added to the Hall of Fame, but to no avail. I happily offered my help to get Bill added, and he was very appreciative. So him and I are working to try and make this happen. Bill Rexford deserves to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and I believe it will happen, and maybe you can help too. If any of you have an Instagram, a Facebook, or a Twitter, please use the hashtag #GetBillRexford into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. As I said in my previous videos, I am proud of what Bill Rexford has accomplished. He is a hero of mine and an idol, and I want to say yet again, thank you, Bill Rexford, for being a NASCAR driver. Thank you for being a champion. And most importantly, Bill Rexford, thank you for being you.